Hi everyone. I hope you guys had a nice meal. Welcome to our next session. The session is for the program is being led by the program Community Wellbeing and Environment. So I will hand over now to Madhuri. Madhuri, could you start?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Madhuri Mandal. I'm the program officer for the Community Wellbeing and Environment program at Dakshin, which is the newest program at Dakshin. So I'll start with introducing myself and the program, and then my team, the rest of the team, will introduce themselves and their work. So I joined Dakshin in May 2019. I have a master's in natural resources and governance from Tata Institute of Social Sciences. At Dakshin, my work is to engage with the communities at grassroots. By communities, I mean definitely the small scale fishing communities or coastal communities, um, and engage with different stakeholders who also are in the same in the same area, like the panchayats or government authorities, local administration. So engaging with these different stakeholders, designing the locally relevant interventions with along with the communities, and implementing them. So yeah, that has been my role at Dakshin. And what about the let's talk about the program now. So the Community Wellbeing and Environment Program, as I mentioned, is the newest program. It initiated in 2019, towards the end of 2019. So the aim of the program is to improve the well-being of coastal communities and to make empowered and resilient coastal communities and ecosystems. And how we do this is basically our aim is to engage with the communities and co-create relevant solutions to improve their social, economic, and other aspects of their life. So basically, we are looking at integrated approaches, holistic approaches, and interventions on improving community health, livelihoods, governance, and environmental outcomes. And this is a long-term program which will be engaging with the communities at the grassroots. So yeah, let's see. So under this program, we have currently a health and environment sub-program or livelihood sub-program which is being developed, and a sports sub-program. So I'll let my team introduce themselves and their work. So let's begin with Biswa.
Yeah. Uh, Hi everyone. My name is Biswa, and I have been associated with the Health and Environment sub-program, which falls under the broader Community Wellbeing and Environment Initiative of Dakshin. So our interventions basically aim to encourage like participatory health governance, strengthen community health institutions and community health workers to improve water sanitation and hygiene practices, nutrition awareness on non-communicable diseases, sexual and reproductive health, mental health, and improve overall access to healthcare and health schemes for the betterment of the fishing communities. So under our health and environment sub program, we have been engaged in studying the impact of COVID on the communities and capacity building of. We have been engaged in capacity building of community health workers, village leaders in dealing with the pandemic. Then we did that by providing them with information kits, posters, and awareness videos in local languages to spread awareness on dealing with pandemic and associated issues. We also collaborated with local NGOs to provide relief in the form of rations, sanitary kits to the affected coastal communities at our field sites. So our COVID response team, which constituted many members of Dakshin, we have also collaborated with our networks across the country to help stranded migrant workers in terms of providing them with food and other necessities. We also coordinated with various government officials of both host and home states to bring the migrants safely back home and provide them with any sort of information they needed to return back. So recently, during the second wave of pandemic, our our sub-program has been actively engaged with community leaders on the ground to promote safe vaccination of fishing communities. And as you might be aware that many of these communities are vaccine hesitant, and we promote safe vaccination by we provided them with infographic videos, posters, and mythbusters, and all sorts of information kits in local languages, so that could promote vaccination among these communities. So just like in a nutshell, like our future interventions, we are planning to, like as I mentioned, we are planning to conduct participatory workshops with communities along with health workers, community health workers like ASHA and Anganwadis, and other local health institutions to raise awareness on issues like wash, nutrition, non-communicable disease, sexual and reproductive health, and occupational safety of fishers. Yeah. Over to Anand.
Yeah, hi everyone. Myself Anand, and I belongs to Andaman Nicobar Islands, and I have done masters in disaster management from Pondicherry University. Now I'm in Dakshin. I'm associated with research and implementation of interventions under the community well-being and environmental programs in the Andaman two field sites. One is Janglighat and another one is Vandoor. I'm also closely working with coastal communities to improving health and environmental issues. And recently, we are working on COVID impact assessment report, and also we are preparing manuals and plans for future workshops, which we are going to implement on ground shortly. And also, I am a part of sports programs, which is helping to people to experience their physical and mental enjoyment. Thank you.
Yeah, so just to pick up where Anand left off, hi everyone, I'm Kanish. I'm working on the sports program as part of Dakshin's Community Wellbeing and Environment larger program. And the idea of the sports program is to use it as a platform just to provide youth and children in coastal communities with a platform and a space to enjoy themselves recreationally and give them something to do in their like in their leisure time and keep themselves occupied. And a larger objective of the sports program is to tie into various other aspects of the community wellbeing and environment program. So I think there was mention of Madhuri and Biswa and everyone had mentioned the health program. So the idea is to potentially use sports as a jumping point to address issues of public health through fitness as an avenue. And then I think Aditya is going to talk about the livelihoods component as well in a bit. So the idea is to use sports as a platform to tie into these various branches of the community wellbeing and environment program. And yeah, so currently where we're at is that I mean, this is given that it's a very new program and we haven't really had a chance to go to the field. We've managed to do a scoping study in the Andamans just to get a sense of how much access to sports and sports facilities youth and children have. And now the plan for the future is to conduct a similar study in Orissa, which would be another one of our field sites, and use that as a stepping stone to actually develop activities and sessions that we could put into practice as soon as possible. So yeah, that's where we're at. Aditya, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Kanish. My name is Aditya. I have recently joined Dakshin only last year. I have a background in sociology and humanities. And within the CWE program, we're trying to put together a livelihoods sub-program, and we're still in the very initial stages of it. And so not much work has been done, but the broad aims of the program are one, to conduct research on coastal livelihoods and needs and vulnerabilities. The second aim would be to support coastal livelihoods and small initiatives to provide technical, financial, and institutional support to these initiatives. And the last one would be to address exclusions in the distribution of government schemes and subsidies. So those are the broad things that we would be looking at. The field sites remain the same across all the CWA programs. So 2 fishing villages in the Andamans, Jangli Ghat and Vandoor, and 2 fishing villages in Odisha, Nulia, Noagaon, and Purnabandha. And the immediate task, at least for the livelihood program, is to do a more comprehensive need assessment with the communities. So along with fisheries experts, we are trying to start a consultative process with the community to just try to understand what the needs are when it comes to livelihoods, what interventions would make sense, and what could be Dakshin's role in facilitating those interventions. So basically to create a sort of long-term roadmap with the community. And that process we hope to start maybe in the next few months. So that's where we are broadly. We can take any specific questions if there are in the Q&A that would follow. I think Madhuri. Yeah. You're muted, Madhuri.
Madhuri, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm saying over to Pragya now again to begin the question answers round. Yeah, and I'm just I would like to just apologize beforehand only because today my internet connection is unstable. So in case I have to drop off, I'll try to rejoin, and others are anyway there to take the questions. Yeah, over to you, Pragya.
Yeah. So first of all, like we will be asking and answering those questions which people had asked while registering, and then we will move on to the questions that people ask in the chat. So the first question is from Varshini. Varshini, if you are in the audience, you could unmute yourself and ask follow-up questions, or ask for clarifications. But the question is, how do you go about conducting community well-being programs? How do you identify and finalize the areas you want to work in? And how does the process like unfold? So I'll repeat the question. How do you go about conducting community well-being programs? Is the first part. And the second part is, how do you identify and finalize the areas you want to work in? So Madhuri, would you want to take this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Pragya. So basically, what we do is how do we narrow down on which communities we would like to work with. So as this is, as we were mentioning, this is a very grassroots sort of engagement with the community. We want to engage with the community over long term and work on multiple aspects, which includes health, governance, livelihoods, environment. So what we did is we conducted a scoping study initially. We conducted a in-depth needs assessment in parallel to that to understand what the community needs. And these are again the communities which we have as Dakshin were associated with. I mean, there was the other programs which were active in these spaces, which are the previous programs like the biodiversity and resource monitoring program, under which the turtle monitoring project was there in Orissa. So that was there almost for 2 decades, 20 years. We were working around Rushikulya estuary for turtle monitoring. So there was already, a sense of what the issues might be. But before beginning the program, we did a needs assessment study to specifically understand what the community needs. So that is one stage. After understanding the needs, looking at taking insights, and also stakeholder consultations with the communities, with the local authorities there, we kind of designed a broad plan of how we would go ahead. And then it is an ongoing process. Once we have sorted, then we decided, okay, these are the communities we already have certain relationships with. We need to build more rapport in terms of leading our interventions. So after narrowing down from the scoping study, from the needs assessment, we chose the sites which we thought have more needs and are also are known to we have better access to, relations to. So those are some things we looked at. And then what we plan is from there we would again scale up. So we are choosing these pilot sites where we are piloting our work and interventions. And once we learn from these sites, we gain insights, we would also like to scale up to other sites also. And also, I was saying that this is an ongoing process. It's what interventions we would do, how the process unfolds is basically it's an ongoing engagement with the community. We keep learning everything. We keep learning some of the other thing newly from them, and it's a very participatory process where the interventions are not very fixed. They are flexible. They are contextual. So yeah, that is how the process unfolds. Yeah,
Thank
over
you,
to you, Fred.
Madhuri.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our
Aditya,
next,
if you would like to add something to it, please do. Aditya, Ganesh, can yeah.
okay. So our next question is by Ramu. How do you define well-being for a community which has been excluded from development? Aditya, would you want to take this one?
Sure. So yeah, I think this is like an approach which is not only specific to the CWE program, but to Dakshin in general, which is that you cannot basically address community well-being in isolation. You have to look at associated processes of governance. So community well-being is very closely linked to safeguarding the traditional rights and economic and political inclusion of small-scale fishing communities. But what this well-being approach allows us to do, besides that, is also look at some of the key aspects of understanding the needs of the community that gets left out when we have only a very specific materially oriented focus. Like if you're focusing only on income or governance, what gets left out in the process is some of the more broader issues, such as the socio-cultural lives of these coastal communities, their political identities, their perceptions, their sense of security and future aspirations, which we believe is integral to understanding the needs of the community. So rather than only look at the material and governance related aspects, this sort of well-being approach allows us to have a much more broader perspective of the community and their needs. Madhuri, do you want to add maybe something else to that?
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you, Aditya. So our next question is by Nitin Kumar Navasivayam. His question is, how critical is community well-being for a sustainable environment? And he wants to know in detail about the work done by the team. This is a question which has been asked by a couple of people, like what is the linkage between community well-being and like a sustainable environment?
Yeah. So in a nutshell, I would say that if a community is not doing well in terms of their other parameters like social, economic, health, if their basic needs are not met, then other things like environment, natural resource management, these become secondary. So what we are trying to look at is that the communities, the small scale fishing communities, which we some of whom are struggling to meet their basic needs, struggling with their livelihoods, their access to healthcare, we try to look at and improve these aspects and strengthen the communities. So once they are able to they are communities are doing well, and they have
I think Madhuri's internet froze. Madhuri, could you maybe switch off your video and just try with the audio? Kanishk, would you want to take over?
So just to take up where Madhuri left off. So I think what she's trying to say is that once communities are actually able to provide for themselves in terms of their basic needs like food, water, health, livelihoods, and they have a like they're secure in their immediate needs, then I think then it's much easier to address, to bring up questions like environmental well-being and sustainability, because obviously if they can't provide for themselves in that immediate in those immediate needs, then it will be much harder to convince anybody to actually take time out of their very important lives and schedules to address something that might not be an immediate concern. So community well-being in that sense would be I think in my mind, that would be a first step to actually addressing sustainability and environmental health, just because they can't potentially if they don't have the means to be able to take care of themselves, it'd be it's almost impossible to expect them to be able to take care of the world around them and their relationship to that. So I think that's the entire theory of change, I guess, in some sense, of the community wellbeing program. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I can see, Madhuri, that you are back. Would you like to add something?
Yeah. Thanks, Kanishk, for ending my sentence and ending it well. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so our next question is by Nishant Venugopal. How are local communities accepting the conservation initiatives? So maybe not just conservation initiatives, but whatever initiatives that the program takes in the field, what is the response? How well is it taken? Nishant, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to ask. You could raise your hand or message on the chat box. Madhuri, would you want to take this?
Yeah. So basically, what I understand by this question is how because we are not directly implementing any conservation initiative as such. So I would think that the question Varshit, means that how communities are accepting the interventions which we are implementing, and those interventions, some of them are more conservation related, say the fisheries co-monitoring and management which we are planning to implement, and some of them like waste management are more like environmentally inclined. So how the main thing which we need to keep in mind, or which will make the communities more accepting towards, receptive towards our interventions, is that we bring them on board from the beginning. So we make these processes participatory, as we have been saying that while we were planning the program, before even designing our interventions, we did a consultation with them, we talked to them, we got to know their needs, what are their both uh, you know in terms of their own needs and in terms of their environmental issues and what they see. So the solutions also, if it comes from them, if they are in an integral part of designing the solutions, definitely there will be much more involvement of the community, and the whole intervention will be more sustainable, because we don't have to be there all the time, which is not even possible. So once an organization which is facilitating all these things also has to back up, then the community itself could take on these initiatives, and it's a long term intervention, long term success. So the whole aim is to keep engaging with them, and collaborating with them, make them a part of the whole process, and not just come and give solutions as an outsider perspective.
Okay, thank you, Madhuri. Is there anything you'd like to add, Biswa?
No, I think Madhuri has covered what we are trying to do in the process. So basically while on the intervention stage on the ground, we try to include communities as much as possible, so that the solution is not one way, and the solution is co-created, and we co-develop with them towards we engage with them, we engage with youth, and try strengthening their community institutions, which are going to play a major role while taking up any issue. So yeah, I think it has been covered.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Deepak. If you are in the audience and if you want to ask follow-up questions, feel free. So the question is, how will the sports project look like on a daily basis? Kanishk, would you like to take?
Yes. So this is something we're still in the process of building, because we haven't exactly had a chance to actually put anything in practice immediately. But the goal is that so a big part of what we're trying to do is also train facilitators from within the communities that we're working with. So I think that is one of the first steps that we're looking to put in practice immediately. So we're reaching out to partners and collaborators who could potentially train youth from the community to become facilitators in sports like ultimate frisbee, football, volleyball, and through these sports potentially also educate youth on life skills like leadership, confidence building, teamwork, and things like that. But in the long term, on a day-to-day basis, the idea would be to have regular activities with regular sports-based activities, or I think sports is probably a limited way to put it, but I think play-based activities would be a better. So experiential learning. So you would use sports as a platform to educate youth on a range of activities. So and because we are so closely tied to the various other sub-programs within the larger CWE program, the idea would also be to regularly involve people from the other sub-teams. So for example, to use sports as a way to work with the environmental education team, for example, on like just to trans just to communicate basic topics as part of an educational curriculum. So that's where we're at. I mean, that's the vision for what we would hope to be doing on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Thank you, Kanishk. So we have a follow-up question from Nishan, like for the previous question. So his question was, do you generally get people to support? Like, do people generally show support to the programs that we conduct on the field?
Yeah, so it varies from community to community because every community is different. The communities we work with are quite different. If I have to compare between like both the sides, if you see the communities in Orissa have much more, I mean their basic needs are much more in compared to Andamans, because Andamans there is still comparatively better health access to healthcare, better access to education. So the support in terms of like the need for the program, if you ask me, is kind of from this community well-being aspect is more in Orissa, but in Andamans there are other problems and challenges. So wherever there are more needs, there will be more inclination of people towards the program interventions. That way, in Andamans, people are more scattered. It's not a very close-knit community as it is like in Orissa, where these are traditional small-scale fishing communities with good community cohesion, with strong leadership. Smaller communities in Andamans, it's kind of spread and it's more larger communities, very mixed sort of communities. There are different people from different parts of the country have come and settled in Andamans. So the support will will vary from community to community, but definitely it's there. I mean that is the process we have built. Uh, I think there is one another question which is very similar, which Aisha Meher has asked in the chat as a follow up, that how do we build trust? So this is a part of trust building process, and once we have a good rapport with the community, once that trust is built, and it is not built like overnight, it's a slow process. Like I mentioned, these communities were already familiar with Dakshin because of presence of other programs, so it's not something we have done in just 1 year, but over the last 1.5 year, we have the engagement level at the grassroots has been much more. We have been constantly supporting them throughout the pandemic, in various ways. Even remotely, we have been constantly in touch with the communities. So we have also expanded the team. 1.5 year back, it was only me, and I mean that's how in 2009 the program began. But then now we have different people in across sites. We have Biswa in Orissa, we have Anand in Andamans. So along with these presence of the people on field side, what we are trying to do is we are also we are planning to hire resource persons from the community. Like you might have heard in the education program, there are facilitators from the community, and Kanishk also mentioned that we will be hiring trainers from the community or training the trainers from the community. So what we are looking at is through the community wellbeing and environment program, that we choose, already we have field assistance from the community in one of the sites in Orissa. So similarly, what we try to do is from other sites, we will be hiring community resource persons who will be our bridge between the community and we as facilitators as an NGO. So when the people from the community only take active role, I mean, they will be our face, and because they have greater understanding of the community, their culture, their social aspects and everything. So they will be even I mean, they will be able to build better rapport. They will be able to communicate the message we want to give to the community, and facilitate, mobilize people. So that is another channel through which we see. So there are like multiple levels at grassroots, at the community level. We want to hire these engage these community resource persons. Then we have field level researchers who will be looking at the program and implementation at the field level, and at the larger programmatic planning level and so on. So yeah, this is how we are looking at the trust building and engagement. Yeah, over to you, Pragya.
Yeah, does that answer your question, Nishant and Aisha? Is there anything you would like to say further, Aisha? You could unmute yourself. Okay, so they're both saying thank you for answering. Meera has a follow-up question. Meera, would you want to unmute yourself and ask the question yourself?
Yeah, sure. So you were talking about the community being the integral part of designing these solutions. Has such situations been more successfully, worked out when compared to, the NGO taking solutions to the community and straight away, going through with it?
Yeah, that is true. So, though, I mean, just to give you a context, that since the program began, there has been the, I mean, rounds of bouts of pandemic. So we could hardly do much on field apart from supporting them I mean, throughout the pandemic. But that is definitely true, that some things which the community feels is important for them. So there is much more probability of that intervention becoming a success. For example, we also are looking at implementing solid waste management solutions along with the community. So all of these areas which we are working with, all of these communities need solid waste management. Sanitation is a huge problem. But what we have seen is, whereas in communities in Orissa it is also very important, but the community doesn't see it as much as important. For them, even more basic needs like healthcare or food, just getting access to food, it's just like day to day earning and eating or surviving. So that sort of, in that sort of scenario, waste management also becomes a little secondary. Whereas in Andamans, where the community is a little better off, in Vandur, there the panchayat itself has been planning to implement the Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin, that scheme. So there the community has been a little more receptive of our also, that our objectives are also to implement these. So we are planning to work with the panchayat there. We have done a waste management workshop with the kids along with the education program. So there it is much more definitely much more receptive if the plan is also, the community also shares similar goals. But in that case, what we do, so in, as I said, in Odisha also it is important, but maybe we'll take it slower. We will be building, we will be doing more consultation with the village I mean committees, and we will be taking it this is definitely needed. We will be trying to show them the issues that improper waste management might have on their health. And if they think that it is important for them, and if they come up with locally I mean, what could be done if they come up with solutions of local village level waste management, I think that will be a much more successful intervention than we coming and telling, you do this, you do that. So that is why, I mean, our though our plans for both the sides are more or less similar in terms of what we want to do in the long term, but they are very also context community specific. They will be modified according to what the community feels is important.
you.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Meera.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Meera. Thank you, Madhuri. So our next question is by Diksha. She's asked, how can we engage different communities, especially tribal people, to get involved in environment programs so that others can learn from them? There is a similar question in the chat box by Rachit. He's asked about if there are any engagements with the indigenous tribes right now. So, Bisa, would you want to take this?
Yeah. So I think like Madhuri, could you just like give a brief point about this thing? So, like because tribal communities again are completely different in context to our coastal communities.
Right, yeah. So basically, we work with small scale fishing communities. I mean, that is our main group which we are focusing at main.
Yeah, I think Madhuri lost her connection. Yeah. So should I continue?
Yeah, Bisa, you can carry on.
Yeah. Like like communities, we can be including communities as stakeholders by sharing and involving the local communities, like in every process, or in every activity of like what we are planning to do. And we can also be like listening and documenting the concerns of the communities, like ensuring representation of the most marginalized and the most vulnerable groups among the communities, and addressing their concerns. uh, I mean, documenting would help us make better decisions based on their concerns, which would in the long run help like include the communities, which yeah, which can like involve the communities in the mainstream process. Does it?
Yeah, sorry, I dropped off again, but yeah, I'll keep my video shut. So yeah, I heard Biswa little. Yeah, I agree with him that even though we work with different sort of communities, some of the basic issues are similar, which the tribal communities, the indigenous Adivasi communities face in India. And he rightly mentioned that, empowering them. Making them aware of their rights. So Biswa have been previously working with the CRG program where he had worked on coastal commons, and in this program, within the health program, health sub program, also we are planning to document some aspects of the coastal commons and traditional ecological knowledge. So if the community has these, if they are aware of their rights, definitely they'll be able to fight some of the destructive forces which are there presently in the coastal scenario. Like in forested areas, Adivasis face a lot of issues with mining and other development plans. Similarly, in the coastal areas, we have a lot of industrialization, then tourism plans of government, a lot of other like aquaculture, which are all destructive practices for the small scale communities, and sometimes they are relocated, like again Adivasi communities are relocated for say tiger protection or something. Here also, for tourism or for just beautifying the beaches or for aquaculture growth, there have been a lot of issues where the small scale fishing communities lose their access to coastal commons and their fishing grounds. So in these cases, empowering them and documenting their coastal commons and their traditional practices, ecological knowledge, will go a long way. And these are very similar to how the work has been done with Adivasi communities to empower them.
Thank you, Madhuri. Rachit, does that answer your question? Would you
Yeah.
like to ask part of your question as well?
Yeah. So thank you for answering this part as well. The other part was this is just curiosity. Like, what's the situation of women empowerment in coastal and if you know in tribal communities as well.
Yeah, so Rajit, yeah, like we mentioned that we are not working with the indigenous tribes, or but we can definitely talk about the situation of women empowerment, or in general, how women fare in these communities. So again, as I was mentioning, this situation also varies from community to community. From Orissa, there are traditional fishing communities in Andamans. Both the communities are again different. One is a Bengali community which has been settled there in 1949 from East Bengal. The other community is basically migrated from Andhra Pradesh and mainly from Srikakulam region, and that forms the largest fishing community in Andamans, the Jangli Ghat. So, majorly in the traditional fishing communities, women are very active. They play a very active role of as they sell the fish. They are the fish vendors in the local markets. So in Jangli Ghat community, I mean, most of the women they do they take place a very important role of um, leading the family and the kids, because the men are out for fishing for around 1 week to 10 days. So, and apart from that, in all these communities in Orissa and in Jangli Ghat, which are the traditional fishing communities, women also are engaged in drying fish and other fish processing activities, and also selling of dry fish and all. But in terms of empowerment, it's again in parts of Orissa there have been um, organized collective action by women. There was a group. There is a group called Samudram, where women have come together with the help of local organizations, and they have sort of done more collective sort of work, which has given them more empowerment to say. There are also local women SHGs. In some places, they're mostly inactive, which we are looking to engage with and empower them, and or start some micro enterprise through the livelihood sub program. In Vandur, the other Bengali community I was talking about, there the women are not engaged in fishing activities, um, because that's traditionally an agricultural community. So, in general, the gender parity, I mean, the patriarchy is definitely there. There, women are subjugated, and they are also they face a lot of domestic violence and violence due to alcoholism and other issues. Also, the communities in Orissa, there is a lot of migration, due to which most of the women have to, like I was saying, they have to manage the households, the children, the elderly on their own, because most of the time the men are out and they are in other states to earn their livelihoods. So there are a lot of hardships. And there are also a lot of health issues they face because of the lack of access to healthcare. So these are the issues. Empowerment is definitely again different, but yeah, as I mentioned, there are some actions which have been taken. Now again, that group Samudram which I was talking about is not very active, but we are looking through this program, we are looking to engage with women stakeholders, especially work on their healthcare, work with the community health workers, the women SHGs, empower them in different ways. Some communities where they have more time, like in the Bengali community in Vandur, we are trying to look at how we can start some other small businesses so that they are more financially independent. Look at trainings where they get some sort of skill building to start some employment activities. And also letting them know their rights, etc. These are the ways basically we're seeing in the long term to empower them more. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Rajat?
Yeah, thank you so much for the detailed answer.
Yeah. You can also ask this question to our CIG team. at 5 o'clock in their session. They have also been working with women fish workers, so they will also have like an interesting perspective to give you. So our next question is from Bhumika. Bhumika, if you want, you could unmute yourself and ask the question yourself, or like ask follow-up questions. So she said that she's interested to know and understand the ways to balance between human and environment, and how humans can exist without harming the environment. So Madhuri, would you want to?
Sure. Yeah, so basically, it's a quite broad question, but what I would say is the question is how to balance between human and environment, right? So, from the communities we work with, basically, if I have to talk from, taking their point of reference, so it's basically they have been just harvesting or using the resources what they need, but there are other communities, for example, if you take urban communities or the mechanized fishing sector, they have been harvesting. If we take if we minimize, reduce the environment to say fisheries, for example, and if we take reference of the small scale fishers, so looking at the harvesting patterns of looking at the fishing trends, so the mechanized fishing sector or the industrial fishing sector takes away a lot of resources in compared to the small scale fishers, and their fishing practices are comparatively less harmful to the environment. So it basically boils down to that how our individual lifestyle, our consumption pattern are it's something, if we are taking as much as we need, that's not an issue as far as I understand. And but if a human or if a community takes much more than what they actually need, it goes beyond, and if the practices are destructive, if the ecosystem is loses its balance and is beyond its capacity to restore itself, then it's something, we cannot go back to, and that's when human beings cannot live in harmony with nature. So that's what we believe, and that is why we are trying to kind of empower the small scale fishing communities, because they have been at the receiving end of this. They have been at the receiving end of the consumption patterns, which the other more developed, more urban parts of the world have been doing their consumption patterns. It's the same thing with Adivasi communities also, forest dependent communities also. So does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
She's
Thank you so
yeah.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bhumika. So another question is from Faraz Ali Khan. He's asked if increase in population is a real threat to environment. So Faraz, if you want, you could unmute yourself and ask, clarify or ask follow-up questions as well. Madhuri or Anand?
Yeah, this is a very similar question, and I think Anand could take this. Yeah.
I think his
Oh, I
internet.
think, yeah, because both of us are at Andamans, so the internet connectivity is a bit poor. Yeah, but um, so this is a very similar question what I was answering previously. It depends on actually the individual's environmental footprint, and not it's actually not dependent entirely on the population, though population does impact. An increase in population definitely has an impact on the environment, but simply if you look at say a city in USA, and very small population there would have much more environmental impact than a much larger population in some rural parts or forested parts of India, even with a larger population. So does the number of people directly impact environment? I would say say it's not very direct impact in compared to how though that population is consuming the resources, what sort of waste they generate, waste in terms of if they are an industrial community, so the pollution they generate. So it all depends on the sort of the consumption patterns of the community, and not just the number of people in that community.
Does that
Yeah.
answer your question, Faraz? You could unmute yourself and let us know. Okay, moving on to the next question. This is a very broad question by Nikita. Can you tell us more about one's health and its significance? So, Biswa, would you want to take this one?
Yeah. Uh, so I think Madhuri and Kanesh have discussed it like precisely like, like for health has its significance because the overall community well-being is quite essential for, better management of natural resources. So a healthy and prosperous community would lead to, better management of their resources and a healthy ecosystem, which would again lead to better livelihood outcomes for the community. So a community also cannot think of a healthy and sustainable environment if they themselves are unhealthy. So like Madhuri mentioned, like and Kanishka also mentioned, like through if they themselves are unhealthy, they are less likely to participate in efforts, for maintaining a hygienic and clean environment, and take up like more participation in natural resource management or governance, or strengthening their community institutions. So I think in this way, health is quite essential. Health, and I would say not just like physical health, but physical and mental health both, is quite essential for like uh, better, sustainable, and better environmental outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add to that point, that is definitely an important thing from the environmental side. But in general, also, if we talk about significance of health, basically, if a person is unhealthy, if a person from the small scale fishing community is unhealthy, they're losing their day's work and also their income. So that directly has an impact on their food security, their income source. So that's a very direct sort of linkage. And only if they're only if they're healthy, they could maintain that sort of a livelihood, a good livelihood, and their income source. And then comes definitely the resource management aspect as well. Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Nikita? She's left some comments in the chat box. Maybe you could reply to her there as well. Nikita, um, is there anything else you'd like to ask? Or okay, she's saying thanks. So we'll just have one last question and then we can wrap up the session. So we've mostly covered the questions that had been sent to us. All the remaining questions we will send replies to via email. So this last question is by Vaibhavi, and she's asked, how do we find an adequate balance between development and environment? So it's a broad question. Vaibhavi, if you want, you could expand on it, like you could clarify or you could ask follow-up questions as well. So Aditya, would you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I think, again, my answer is going to be very general. So broadly, it would be an issue about access and trying to understand basically who has access who has access to their resources, to their life chances in this developmental process. So ensuring that development is much more inclusive, includes the communities that is affected the most by the developmental process, and ensuring that marginalized and excluded communities their rights are safeguarded, ensuring this would make this contradiction between development versus community welfare much more nuanced. So, yeah.
Hello, I am Magatha, and one question.
Yes.
Yes, Magatha.
Namaste. I know there in English. My problem to the English language. मैं एक बात बोलना चाहती हूँ, जो माइग्रेशन के लिए जो सेकेंड कोविड पीरियड आया था, अभी जो जितना माइग्रेशन कोविड पीरियड में जो चेन्नई केरला में जो काम करता है, पहले कोविड पीरियड में सभी लोग को सब्सिडी मिला था, कुछ खाना और कुछ पैसा। ये भी अभी ये सेकेंड पीरियड में कोविड के लिए कुछ मिला नहीं। हेलो।
हाँ मगता जी, माधुरी,
हाँ।
या माधुरी
हाँ, टेल मी
अच्छा। सो आई थिंक क्या आपका जो क्वेश्चन है वो काफ़ी स्पेसिफिक है। तो हम लोग तो आपके साथ काम कर ही रहे हैं, तो बिस्वा और मैं हम लोग सेपरेटली जो इशू है उसको ये करते हैं, उस पर देखते हैं। बट अभी तो ये इशू के बारे में हमें जानकारी नहीं है, तो उसको ऑफलाइन में देखते हैं ये इशू में क्या कर सकते हैं आपके साथ। ठीक है।
ठीक है। और एक क्वेश्चन बताएगा क्या?
हाँ हाँ बोलिए।
और एक क्वेश्चन है, जो जितना फिशरमैन है, फिशरमैन के लिए फिशरी डिपार्टमेंट आजकल छोटा इंश्योरेंस नहीं है, क्योंकि जो कुछ सब्सिडी मिलता है डिपार्टमेंट जो लोग को सब्सिडी देता है, लेकिन आजकल तो किसी की इंश्योरेंस नहीं है। जो आजकल इंश्योरेंस ऐसे ही में करना पड़ेगा, नहीं तो बाजार में जाके करता है। फिशरी कम्युनिटी के लिए एक इंश्योरेंस होना चाहिए जो फिशिंग करता है। इसका कोई पॉलिसी है क्या?
जो फिशिंग जो बोट्स है उनके लिए जो लाइसेंस होता है लाइफ इंश्योरेंस एक्सीडेंट रिलेटेड, उसके अलावा आप बोलना चाहते हैं कोई और इंश्योरेंस?
नहीं, जो फिशिंग करता है ना, आजकल तो एक बोट में 5 आदमी जाते हैं, लेकिन एक क्या होता है ना, आजकल में क्या होता है, एक बोट के लिए एक इंश्योरेंस होना चाहिए। जो औरत जो लड़का लोग जाता है, इसका पास ज्यादा इंश्योरेंस नहीं है।
ओके ओके ओके, ठीक है। ठीक है, ये पॉइंट भी नोट कर लेते हैं हम, और आपके साथ और फिशरीज डिपार्टमेंट के साथ आदित्य भी लाइवलीहुड्स प्रोग्राम अभी हमारा शुरू होगा थोड़े दिन में, जिसमें स्पेशली एक्सेस रिलेटेड और ये इंश्योरेंस एक्सेस सब्सिडीज ये सब रिलेटेड जो है हम लोग काम करेंगे। सो ये सब चीज़ें हम ध्यान में रखेंगे और आपके साथ फिर बात करेंगे, और इसका क्या सोल्यूशन कर सकते हैं, गवर्नमेंट के साथ कैसे बात कर सकते हैं, ये देखेंगे। तो ठीक है, आई थिंक हमारा टाइम अभी हो गया है इस प्रोग्राम का। तो ओवर टू प्रज्ञा अगेन।
नहीं, मैं तो बहुत काम बिजी में था, इसलिए जल्दी आया ये मीटिंग अटेंड करने के लिए। एक तो थैंक यू जी।
थैंक यू मगता जी, आपसे बात करके अच्छा लगा, आपको सुनकर। अब now we'll yeah. Thank you Aditya, thank you Kanish, Madhuri, Biswa, Anand for
कनिष्क का भी मेरा क्वेश्चन है जी, लेकिन अभी तो नहीं है कनिष्क का। ओके, थैंक यू जी।
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this session. Now we'll have to quickly move on to the next session. So I will hand over now to Ishan for the next session, which is on sustainable fisheries. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you.